subject. And we are talking to Leonard Cecil. Good morning, Leonard. How are you doing?
Good, fine, thank you. And how are you doing?
I'm very well, sir. It's always a pleasure to talk to you. Now, you've joined us before, and you are, once again, highly recommended. You come via the Pet Professional Guild, don't you, sir?
Yes, sir, I do. Yeah.
But today we're going to be talking about some of the experiments that you've been carrying out. You've been carrying out experiments on shock collars. Tell us a little bit about that.
Okay, well, first of all, I have to say that your own video of how to use a shock collar properly is just a stroke of genius. I love it. And I'm looking forward to doing the same thing with mine when the time comes.
Excellent. I'll be looking forward to watching that video. But thank you very much for the compliment. So how have you got stuck into this? What's because you've got a series of experiments. What's the situation?
It's a very fair question because theoretically speaking, we're in Switzerland where I'm from. Oh, wait a minute. Let me put down my rack of roast Appenzeller here. Where I'm from, theoretically speaking, shock collars and prongs and chokers and chemical sprays and stuff are illegal.
Oh, wow.
But they are being used, and you can run into them, not every day, but you can run into them. And I've now posted a link to a shock collar trainer in Bern so people can see, actually from somebody who, if you want to say it, does it well, how it's done, at least in one style of shock collar training. Okay, be that here or there, it has nothing to do with what I'm now talking about. I am just basically, for my own personal philosophy, against anything that is that causes pain or fear in a dog. I think there are better ways to do that. And you know that the whole discussion, if you still call it that, between the shockers and the non-shockers reaches absurd proportions with both sides claiming things that simply are not true. For example, that a dog trained with shock is a happy dog, or a dog trained with shock is an unhappy dog, or that it's not shock, it's a stimulus, it's a way of getting the dog's attention, or that it doesn't hurt, it tickles, in fact. And we've all, anyone who's run into them on YouTube, you've seen the interviews of some drunken college students slapping a shock collar on his throat and screaming and falling off the sofa on the one hand, or the shock collar proponent laying a shock collar on a vet's hand and giving the person shocks who says, "Oh, that's not bad at all." So I wanted to look at this in a scientific way that a non-scientist can. In other words, what are the claims? What can we prove? What can we disprove within our own certain confines of what's possible for us? My first constraint is that I am not an academic, although I did go to the university, but I'm not a researcher, so I don't know or can't frame such an experiment like this the way that a research scientist would. But I've read enough to know that I have to be able to ask questions in such a manner that data can be first gathered and then analyzed, and then you can answer the questions you've asked. So the questions that I ended up asking were, does shock feel different depending upon where the shock is administered? Meaning, if you're doing it on your hand, is it the same feeling as when you're shocking or when the collar is on your throat, where it is on a dog?
That's a brilliant question. That's a very, very good question, because you do see a lot of demonstrations where they put it on their wrist or on their arm, and I kind of think the throat's got to hurt. The throat's got to hurt. So what else? What other questions did you have?
Okay, so we wanted to find out if that makes a difference where it's put on and how it's put on. If you read the handbooks for the shock collars, it says that it has to be put on high on the throat so that it doesn't slip down on the one hand, but on the other hand, you should be able to slip one finger under the contacts of the shock collar. Okay, I mean, you can do that with it stuck up pretty high in the dog's throat, and when you put a finger under there, all it's doing is on the back of the throat, compressing into the dog's fur and muscle tissues. So it's going to be pretty snug. Then also, how does one subject experience the shock as opposed to other subjects, and how does one subject show this experience of shock as opposed to how another subject shows the experience of the shock. And how then do the subjects actually classify the shock, whether it be pleasant or annoying or painful? So we had 7 subjects, so it certainly isn't a representative field. It's not even enough for a full statistical analysis, but we can look at the 7 subjects and take that for what it was, 7 people. There were 4 tests in the experiment, and with the first test, the shock collar was laying with the 2 prongs touching the palm of the hand. The second test was the shock collar in the same position, but being strapped onto the hand so that the contacts do actually come more firmly in contact with the skin. The third test was putting it on the other side of the forearm, not the underside, but the top side, the hairy side with men, strapping it on there. And then the fourth test was strapping it actually onto the person's throat. And then each subject was shown how it was given the sender, the sender that consists of it's a standard PetSafe Deluxe 10-level shock system. The sender has a shock button, a sound button, and a light that indicates that the impulse is being sent. And they were told that when they get the cue from me, which would go like this, test 1, level 1, they set the dial at 1 and give themselves a shock at any point. And some needed a little time to kind of screw up their courage and give themselves a shock. They could stop at any time. They could stop after the first shock. They could go all the way up to level 10.
Unlike a dog. Let me just throw that in there. Unlike a dog who doesn't get the choice.
Exactly. And there were also people who already at level 4, and I have to explain, they had to then quantify the shocks that they felt on a sliding scale from 1 to 10, 1 being no problem, and 10 being get me out of here. Okay?
Oh, okay.
So there were some people who already said, whoop, that's it, when they hit level 4 of the shock, level 4 of 10 levels of shock. You know? Other people took it right up to the edge. I didn't see anybody actually chuckle and say, you got another 10 levels. But everybody seemed to be very impressed that it was not a very pleasant experience. And then another thing that we also saw very plainly, you can see this especially if you go to the study itself and click on to the second set of subjects. I've made videos of this. Go to subject number 7. In test number 3, where she's got it strapped to the back of her hand, and she hits about level 4 on the shock collar, and her whole hand jumps up in the air. And this is because we think that if you just have the shock contacts laying in the palm of your hand, you're getting the surface experience of the shock. If you press it then into the flesh, that shock is going through the fat levels of under the skin into the muscles, maybe even hitting a nerve or a tendon.
Oh.
And now there's a gentleman in Switzerland who, although it's illegal, and I have no idea how he gets away with it, he actually has a film on his website where it says underneath the film, you click on this link to download the film, where he's showing it about 30 seconds into the film, a dog with a shock collar on, where he's just giving a shock, 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 shock. The dog is sitting perfectly still, doesn't seem to be bothering him whatsoever, and his whole neck is jumping up and down every time he's getting the shock, just going into muscular contractions. Now, the other thing that we saw with this shock experiment is that people reacted physically in different ways, and it had nothing to do with the level of shock that they were receiving or how they experienced the shock. There was one gentleman who, when the shock collar was on his arm, he kind of basically moaned and didn't like it at all, but took it all the way up to level 10. There's another gentleman who said at level 4 that was it, but his whole facial expression and bodily expression didn't change. There was no jerking. There was no nothing. He said, that's it. Another woman reacted in the exact same way. In other words, she got to a certain point, and every one she gave herself the shock. She said, oh, that's about a strength 6. And then she went to the next one and said, okay, level 4. Oh, that's it. But there was no physical manifestation of her discomfort. Now, this is important to notice because in the handbooks to these shock collars, they say that you set the level, the working level, and the punishment level of the shock according to how what the dog shows as a reaction to getting the shock. In other words, the working level is when the dog lips his lick or shakes off or scratches the collar or something like that. That's the working level. Now, if you have a subject who is showing absolutely no physical manifestations of the pain, but is already past his own tolerance point, what is the dog feeling when its neck is jumping up and down with muscular contractions, but is not actually showing any other sign of discomfort? And then you go to the next level or the next level, because it says if the dog shows no reactions, up the level, one level at a time, until the dog shows the reactions. And you know darn well that if your dog is going to go chasing after a squirrel and you want him to stop, you're going to really zap him. You're going to give him the charge that's going to break off that chasing the squirrel. What are you doing to your dog at that point?
That's not good, is it? I mean, we're talking about sensitivity. Some people are very sensitive and others aren't so. But also you're saying that they're not necessarily giving out the impression of how hard it is. Listen, Leonard, this is fascinating. So if you don't mind, I want you to hang around for a couple of minutes. We're going to take a short break and be back in just a moment. Will you do that for us?
Sure.
Excellent.
Sure.
Don't go anywhere.
Mm-hmm.
This is iTalk FM.
Oh, no, not again, Mavis. If only I could get this fan belt fixed. Take your tights off, love. That'll do it.
Stop it, Fred. I'm a good girl, and anyway, there's no need to panic. You're covered by Liberty Seguros, remember?
With Liberty's new and improved car insurance covers, breakdown cover comes as standard, and a courtesy car or taxi is provided. Not to mention the many other extra advantages too. And as always, great value for money. No wonder we're the market leaders. Call Liberty Seguros now on 902-255-258. See your broker or visit our dedicated new website at libertyexpatriates.es. Liberty Seguros, the expat's #1 choice. Conditions apply.
Thousands of very happy people are using Chromogen lenses and contact lenses. Chromogen is helping people all over the world to resolve problems like macular degeneration, lazy eye, light sensitivity, and is the fastest way to get results in visual training. Not to mention, if you're colourblind, Chromogen can give you sight in colour and is the #1 answer to helping overcome dyslexia, ADD, and other learning difficulties. So waste no more time and get a complete eye test for free with Chromogen lenses today. Call us on 610-700-617 to find an English-speaking Chromogen specialist near you.
Vicky, help! I have to shift these extra kilos. Summer is coming and I have my son's wedding. What am I going to do? I've tried everything. And look at you. You're looking great. So what's your secret?
It's Cambridge 800.
Wow. Tell me more.
It's so easy. You have a personal accredited Cambridge 800 consultant. She taught me the most important part, how to keep it off.
Sounds just what I've been looking for. How can I find my own consultant?
It's easy. Call this number, 952-586-324. That's 952-586-324.
You are a true pal. I'm calling them now. Thanks.
Take control of your weight today. Lose weight and keep it off with Cambridge 800. Total Wellbeing welcomes you to their wonderful world of natural health. Relieve your aches and pains with revolutionary technology. the PainSolve, a CE-certified medical device which uses pulsed electromagnetic frequencies for your internal health, including reversal of cardiovascular disease, regulation of blood sugar levels, and reduced risk of stroke. Take ProArginine Plus, a natural nutritional supplement backed by clinical medical trials.
Yes, I think to myself, what a wonderful world.
Come and visit us at www.totalwellbeing.es for all our natural products, which will be delivered directly to your door.
Ooh, yeah.
Call iTalk FM now on 951 043 843.
Yeah, absolutely. Do get in touch. If you want to get in touch with me, you can call me 951 043 843, or you can send me a text, 951 140 223. Now, the texts are up and running this week, so make sure that you send in your information. And if you've used a shock collar on a dog, or you've got an opinion on this, then now's the time to get in touch, because I'm talking to Leonard Cecil. Leonard is from the Pet Professional Guild, and he's telling us all about shock collars, and we are talking about some of the experiments that he's been doing with these shock collars, and there are some very, very interesting points. Now, Leonard, we were talking about sensitivity and how some dogs will show, or in fact these experiments are done on people, which I definitely agree with. But some of these are done with people, but some people were showing effects and others weren't so much. So where do we go from there?
Well, okay. First of all, there's no attempt in these experiments to address the ethical and moral questions involved of using aversive in training. This is really simply taking a look at first of all what it is and what it isn't. And it's also important to remember, and I've talked to so many people about this, that the physiology of dogs and the physiology of people, in terms of the consistency and makeup of skin and cellular material and stuff like that, is the same, with one important exception, and that is that dogs do not sweat, and people do, so that there are there's the possibility of salt residues on human skin that might conduct electricity better than on dog skin. On the other hand, dogs have a lot of fat in their fur, and here the opinions are kind of split as to whether that's a better or a less good conductor. So, and I have two different studies that say completely opposite things. But other than that, it makes a lot of sense that within certain analogous comparisons, what we're experiencing with people is very, very similar to what dogs experience when they are shocked. And that was the only purpose of this particular experiment. The next experiment will be to compare two basic training methods that shock trainers use with each other. The first one is more or less a reinforcement punishment training, where a dog is reinforced for getting the command right, and is punished for getting the command wrong. Now, the reinforcement is, like any reinforcement, depends on what's reinforcing for the dog, or in this case for the human. The punishment, of course, will be the shock. And the same 7 volunteers from the first experiment are taking part in this one. And since I already know what their highest tolerable levels are of shock, I will only go to the halfway point in terms of what I will now apply them when they get it wrong.
You're too nice to them.
So that we do have a large measure of safety, that no one's going to pull a revolver, because everyone, of course, in Switzerland is armed, and pull a revolver out and shoot me for shocking them. You know what they say in dog training, safety first. Well, same thing in
human training,
science, I suppose.
Very good.
The second method of training is called avoidance training. where you give the command and you start shocking the dog immediately. And you keep shocking the dog until the dog finishes carrying out the command that you gave the dog. And the reward for having successfully carried out this command is stopping the shock. Taking your finger physically off the send button for shock.
Okay, now, are we talking about letting the dog trying to figure out what it is that the human wants, or does the dog already know what's expected of him?
Well, that's a good question, because it depends upon now who you actually talk to, what you read, and what their own philosophy is as to how they actually do it. Some people actually do this as a kind of a shaping thing, where they give a command, they say sit, and then shock the dog until the dog sits, without the dog actually having brought this word sit in conjunction with the action that it's supposed to do.
So sorry, let me just jump in there. I mean, that is insane. That's like me telling you to sit down in Swahili, and if you don't speak Swahili, I'm just going to keep slapping you until you get it right.
Oh, did I mention that Experiment 2 and Experiment 3 will be done in a language that the people don't know?
Love it. Genius. Absolutely brilliant.
So, my 50% day job is at the ethnological seminar at the University of Zurich, doing IT support and systems administration. And so I just signed up one of the professors. He will get a list of commands from me. She will get a list of commands from me, and she will record them in Turkish and in Uzbek. And I will use Turkish for the second experiment and Uzbek for the third experiment.
Wow.
And yeah, and so and there's going to be a surprise also. I don't know if anybody's listening in, but I can't tell you until after we've done it. But it will simulate a training experience. Let's put it this way. And the idea then is I'll have half the group, so either 3 or 4 doing the one method and 3 or 4 doing the other method. They'll draw straws. They won't know what they're drawing for. They'll just draw straws. But that will tell me which method to apply in the course of the experiment. And I will then quantify this experiment in terms of effectiveness over a 10-minute period. I'll have a set of behaviors that we will train. And if we reach the goal within the 10 minutes, I'm going to have also a counter that I can count how many times I've zapped the person. And this will be filmed. And, of course, then there'll be an interview after this experiment where the person can just freely associate, explaining what they felt and when and why during the course of the experiment. For example, how did you feel when, after the third trial of not knowing what to do, you get shocked again? I won't pose the question, but I'm hoping they'll answer the question, because I don't want to lead them through their own experiences. I want them to tell me without being guided what they should tell me. And then I'm going to show the films to a psychologist who will examine the films and hopefully be able to offer an analysis of things like body position, posturing, facial expression, tone of voice, if the person does actually speak during the experiment itself, and maybe also during the interview. I'm not sure.
Very interesting. That's a great little twist
into the experiment.
But listen, Leonard, we've got a question that's come in via text message,
Sure.
and they haven't left a name, but it says, have there been any situations demonstrated using a shock collar where you think it could have a place? What about going to stop a dog going near snakes, saying you couldn't risk the dog getting bitten ever?
Okay. Now, that question has two sides. Every such question has the two sides. Number one, is there an alternative method of training that doesn't entail aversives? And number two, even if there isn't, does it cross your own ethical and moral line as to what you're willing to do to or with a dog. Now, there are our own PPG member, Diane Garrod, online has a protocol for snake avoidance, which has to do with conditioning the dog to basically take off when it sees the motion of the snake and the smell of the snakes. Now, the smell is going to be a little difficult because you actually have to train for the specific snake involved. Now, Steve White from the state of Washington also has a protocol to this effect of actually training the dog what they call an alternate behavior. This is, of course, a very specific point in behaviorism of how you go about training specific unwanted behaviors away. You ask yourself, what could the dog do instead? Well, instead of investigating, you send the dog away. The other thing is that experience has shown with anti-snake training, and I just saw a film about this from New Zealand about anti-kiwi training, is that even the trainers themselves say, well, you have to bring the dog back every year for a refresher. And what they do is they basically expose the dog to a snake and just turn the dial all the way up and just shock the hell out of the dog. So that the dog, when he sees a snake, the theory is that they run away. But not all dogs run away. Many dogs will attack at that point.
Bloody, I mean, that sounds very, very serious.
If that snake training, for example, is done on the edge of a basketball court, yeah, the next time that dog sees a basketball court, they might have a panic attack because it's thinking that it might get that shock again, which shows that it doesn't necessarily associate that shock with that snake or only with that snake, but also with the entire surroundings where
Leonard,
that happened.
Leonard, I'm really sorry. I've got to cut you short, mate. We are going into the news in any second, so I'm going to have to stop you there. Will you come on again and tell us about how you get on with the other two experiments?
Sure.
Fantastic.
Absolutely.
I'm so sorry because this sounds fascinating, but I'm really, really going to have to take a break. There you go. Leonard Cecil from the Pet Professional Guild, thank you very much. We will talk to you again soon. Bye-bye.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye.
Oh, such a shame I have to cut him short there, but I do have to take a very quick break.